Thank you, Senator Wong. We will go now to questions. Senator McCarthy.
Thank you, Mr President. My question is to the Minister representing the Prime Minister, Senator Birmingham. In a report released this month, Mr Morrison's hand-picked quarantine advisor, Ms Jane Halton, told him, and I quote, "Some quarantine settings, such as quarantine in a purpose-built facility, are better able to mitigate transmission risks, especially for high-risk travellers and in respect of variants of concern." Almost 2 years into the pandemic and with a new variant of concern on our shores, why has Mr Morrison failed to establish even one new federal quarantine facility?
The Minister representing the Prime Minister, Senator Birmingham.
Thanks. Thank you, Mr President, and I thank Senator McCarthy for her question. A similar question to the one in which she asked yesterday. And that question yesterday, as I outlined to the Senate, Mr President, we do recognise that there is an ongoing role in the future for there to be centres of national resilience of greater number and scale than we have had in the past. Through the course of the COVID-19 pandemic, we have successfully worked in partnership with the Northern Territory Government, who I acknowledge, to utilise the Howard Springs facility and to expand significantly the Howard Springs facility to a 2,000-bed capacity. Mr President, alongside that, we are working with governments in Victoria to ensure the establishment of a new Centre for National Resilience, that we will see initial handover of beds at that facility to the Victorian Government by the end of this year, and with the governments of Queensland and Western Australia for further facilities, Mr President. Now, these will all provide long-term resilience capability. In terms of the broader quarantine effort, states and territories have done a very strong job in working to ensure that we had quarantine capacities for the most extraordinary of circumstances that COVID-19 have presented. In relation, Mr President, to the Omicron variant, the government has made certain announcements to pause the next stage of reopening that we have indicated. And we don't wish to see any step backwards from the safe reopening of Australia. The very high levels of vaccination that we have achieved as a country do provide very strong protections. We use this pause to ensure that we can continue, as we always have, get the best possible health advice to continue to keep Australians safe.
Senator McCarthy, a supplementary question.
Chief Executive of the Business Council of Australia, Jennifer Westacott, said this morning, and I quote, "Why can't we get the systems in place to manage this? There are 24 letters in the Greek alphabet. Everyone assumes that we're going to have more mutations and variants." End of quote. Why has the Morrison government refused to take responsibility for national quarantine?
Minister.
Thanks, Mr President. Well, as I outlined in the primary answer, Mr President, we are indeed working on a range of additional facilities alongside the expansion we created in Howard Springs. We are fully funding the development of those different facilities under memoranda of understanding that we have entered into with the relevant states. Those memoranda of understanding have the states operating those facilities consistent with the operational capabilities that they have delivered throughout the COVID-19 pandemic for the purposes of providing quarantine. I would stress that whilst there are new variants, we do need to all show responsibility in terms of how we discuss those new variants. That, for example, Professor Lewin from the Doherty Institute this morning made clear that it's highly likely the vaccines still work, that we're quite confident the vaccines will still work, and whilst we are pausing some steps to get further advice and information, we ought to make sure we maintain confidence of Australians.
Minister, your time has expired. Senator McCarthy, a second supplementary. Mr
President, on what date will a new federal quarantine facility first commence operation?
Minister.
Thanks, Mr President. As I said in the primary question, the Howard Springs facility has operated largely throughout and has been significantly expanded, indeed doubled, during the operation of that facility. As I also said in the primary question, Mr President, the facility being built in Victoria will see handover of the first beds in that facility to the Victorian Government before the end of this year. The Victorian Government will then take on the operational capabilities. I thank them, as I do the governments of Western Australia and Queensland, for the way in which they have engaged with the Commonwealth through the design stages, their officials working with us in terms of all of the different protocols necessary to ensure the highest standards of infection control, the highest standards of protocols of safety in relation to those facilities, and the agreements that they have entered into in relation to the Commonwealth responsibility for building and their role in relation for operation.
Senator Askew.
Thank you, Mr President. My question is to the Minister representing the Prime Minister, Senator Birmingham. Can the Minister please inform the Senate on the status of the final report on the independent review into Commonwealth parliamentary workplaces, titled Set the Standard? Thank you.
The Minister representing the Prime Minister, Senator Birmingham.
Thank you, Mr President. I thank Senator Askew for her question, her interest in this matter, as I know that many senators, many members of the House of Representatives have expressed serious interest and concern for these matters. Can, on behalf of all of us, welcome the report of the independent review of Commonwealth parliamentary workplaces, led by the Sex Discrimination Commissioner Kate Jenkins. Thank her for her leadership in this review and for the report Set the Standard. This report highlights that people who work in our parliament and the agencies that exist across its operation consider it a privilege to be here and work with the utmost of integrity, making a difference to our nation in the vast majority of cases. We should give thanks and celebrate the work of all of those tireless individuals right across this building and across parliamentary workplaces. However, the report also highlights that people, particularly women, in our workplaces have experienced bullying, sexual harassment and sexual assault. It is, Mr President, unacceptable. Some of the examples in this report are deeply distressing. And it is clear that we have not had pathways to successfully prevent these instances from occurring, nor to effectively respond and support people when they have experienced it. Every single Australian has a right to feel and to be safe at work. The high-pressure environment of this workplace is not an excuse for unacceptable behaviour. We should, as the report's title says, set the standard. The report provides 28 practical recommendations for change, which we have a responsibility to make and to work positively through. I thank all of those who have engaged courageously in this review, sharing their stories and helping to drive change and a better workplace for all. I acknowledge this report will be distressing for many as well, and for those in this building and beyond it who may be distressed by aspects of its release, I urge them to access the support services available, be they 1800 APH SPT, 1800 RESPECT, or the other services available.
Senator Askew, a supplementary question.
Thank you. Can the Minister advise what steps have already been taken to improve the safety and workplace culture of Commonwealth parliamentary workplaces ahead of the government receiving this report?
Minister.
Thanks, Mr President. Whilst this important review was underway throughout much of this year, the Prime Minister also commissioned Deputy Secretary in the Department of Prime Minister and Cabinet, Stephanie Foster, to review procedures and processes involved in identifying, reporting and responding to serious incidents that occur in the parliamentary workplace. In March, the government accepted an urgent recommendation from Ms Foster to establish an independent, trauma-informed confidential support line 1800 APH SPT. This has been supporting staff and MPs, their family and friends to receive necessary support. Ms Foster provided her consultation report in June of 2021. Following feedback from across the parliament, Ms Foster provided a final report in July of 2021. The government accepted the 10 recommendations in that report, working to establish the Safe and Respectful Workplaces training program, the Parliamentary Workplace Support Service and transparency measures and monitoring measures in this regard. I thank Ms Foster for her work, in addition to that of Commissioner Jenkins and all those who have engaged in these processes, including across the parliament.
Senator Askew, a second supplementary.
Thank you, Mr President. How does the government propose to consult with all parties and parliamentarians on the recommendations and implementation of the report?
Minister.
Mr President, the review was established with engagement with the opposition, the Greens, other minor parties, crossbenchers, current and former staff. We engaged in terms of the reviewer, the terms of reference, the timing, and worked collaboratively to ensure a review was put in place and that could provide maximum confidence for individuals to participate, and to make sure that participation gave us the best possible basis upon which to prevent bullying, sexual harassment or sexual assault in the future. I thank the opposition and all other parties for their engagement to date and commit that we wish to continue the cooperation in relation to the response to this report. The Prime Minister has asked me and the Special Minister of State to consult with all on the way forward to respond. Our desire is to work in a positive way to implement recommendations in this review to effect the type of change that can ensure our parliamentary workplaces do set the standard for safety, for culture, for respect.
Minister. Senator Keneally.
Thank you, Mr President. My question is to the Minister representing the Prime Minister, Senator Birmingham. As the Omicron variant emerges in Australia, a webinar promoted by One Nation was recently hosted by the so-called COVID Medical Network, which is under investigation by the TGA for promoting hydroxychloroquine. Why did 4 government members, LNP MP George Christensen and Senators Canavan, Rennick and Antic, appear on this anti-vaccination, anti-mandate webinar?
The Minister representing the Prime Minister, Senator Birmingham.
Thanks, Mr President. Mr President, if there is something that the emergence of the Omicron variant should reinforce to all Australians and to all those around the world, it is the importance of vaccination. It is the importance of encouraging all Australians to be vaccinated. Now, whilst, Mr President, from the outset, our government has always said that vaccination should be voluntary and that we would not enforce mandates except for working with the states and territories in relation to those areas of highly vulnerable individuals such as aged care, disability care and those in health practice. We absolutely encourage every single Australian to get vaccinated. And, Mr President, I urge every member across this parliament to engage in such encouragement as well.
Order.
More than 19 million individual Australians have had at least one dose of the vaccine to date. And that is an incredible turnout by Australians who now account for some of the most highly vaccinated populations in the world.
Minister. Senator Keneally on a point of order.
Yes, thank you, Mr President. Direct relevance. I draw the minister back to the question. His answer here is not relevant to the question. It was very specific. Why did 4 members of the government appear on this webinar?
You've brought the minister back to part of the question. There was an additional statement at the beginning of the question about the Omicron variant. I'm listening carefully to the minister. You've had the chance to bring him back to the question. Minister, you have the call.
Thanks, Mr President. Mr President, as I said before, I encourage and the government encourages every member of the government, of the crossbench of the parliament, to encourage vaccination and to encourage its take-up. I urge all members to do so, and it is the urging and the health advice from across the country that has helped to achieve 92.4% of Australians over the age of 16 to have had at least that first dose. 92.4% of Australians who have heeded that message and who are out there having been vaccinated, getting vaccinated and building those numbers day in, day out. We will continue to work to lift those numbers and to grow those numbers as high as is possible.
Minister, your time has expired. Senator Keneally, a supplementary question.
Thank you. A description of the One Nation hosted webinar states, and I quote, "The people have been tricked into thinking the vaccines offer the best way to reduce death and hospitalization." Does Mr Morrison agree with these views?
Minister.
Mr President, the quote that was put to me, I outright reject. Mr Morrison outright rejects it, and the government outright rejects it, Mr President. We are very clear that vaccines do offer the best possible way for individuals to protect themselves, their loved ones and the communities in which they live and work. That's a message we have delivered consistently to Australians and has driven and achieved one of the highest vaccination rates in the world. Vaccination rate that is above the OECD average, that is above many other nations, who have suffered from COVID-19 far more than Australia has to date. It's our approach that has saved more than 30,000 lives. It's an approach that has delivered this high rate of vaccination. It's an approach that sees us as one of the most protected countries in the world now, having had such high rates of vaccination and being one of the first to have a nationwide booster program.
Your time has expired. Senator Keneally, a second supplementary
Thank
question.
you.
Order.
Mr. President, may I ask for...
I was calling Senator Canavan to order.
Thank you, Mr.
Senator
President.
Keneally, you have the call.
Will Mr. Morrison...
Order. We'll start the clock again. Senator Keneally, you have the call.
Thank you, Mr. President. Will Mr. Morrison counsel Mr. Christensen and Senators Rennick, Antic and Canavan for spreading dangerous disinformation as the Omicron variant emerges?
Minister.
Oh, no, Mr. President, as I have just said
Order.
in this place, I urge all members of the government and all members across the parliament to encourage people to get vaccinated. Mr. Morrison urges all members of the government and all members across the parliament to encourage Australians to continue to get vaccinated. That is what we will each continue to do. It's what the Health Minister will do. It's what Minister Colbeck will do.
Senator Keneally. Minister, Senator, order. Senator Wong on a point of order.
The point of order is direct relevance. This question goes to Mr. Morrison's actions. And the question, there was only a single question, which is whether he would counsel those members and senators who are active in spreading disinformation, disinformation that's contrary to government policy. That's the question. Where's the bit of leadership?
Senator Wong, I cannot direct the minister how to answer a question. I believe the minister was being directly relevant to the question. Minister, you have the call.
Thanks, Mr. President. As I said, Mr. President, we urge all members of the government, all members of the parliament to encourage other Australians to get vaccinated. Indeed, we urge all Australians to encourage one another to get vaccinated. Having achieved such incredibly high rates of vaccination across the country, we are working with states and territories and health officials to particularly target communities of lower vaccination rates, noting the critical importance of having those high rates spread right across the nation.
Minister, your time has expired. Senator Waters.
Thanks, President. My question is to the Minister representing the Prime Minister. The Human Rights Commission's comprehensive report, Set the Standard, is a much-needed reality check on the cultural and structural changes needed in this place. We have the bravery of people like Brittany Higgins, Rochelle Miller, Chelsea Potter, Danya Marnie, Saxon Mullins, Grace Tame, Chanel Contos and strong women in the press gallery to thank for this report existing. I'd also like to thank every single participant who shared their stories and their trauma to create this report. When half the staff who work here have experienced bullying or sexual assault or harassment and only 11% report it, we need action. Can the minister confirm that no staffer or MP in this building will be subject to an experience and a bungled response like Brittany Higgins had to endure? Will the government commit to fully implementing all of the recommendations in this landmark report, fully funded and in the time frames Commissioner Jenkins recommends?
The Minister representing the Prime Minister, Senator Birmingham.
Thanks, Mr. President. I thank Senator Waters for the question and acknowledge her engagement with me through the course of this year, as I acknowledged before, engagement from across this chamber, the other chamber, staff, current and former, in relation to the commissioning of this work and also in relation to the actions the government has taken in response to Stephanie Foster's recommendations earlier this year. I think in responding, as we did as a parliament, to Stephanie Foster's recommendations, we've shown that this parliament and this government recognises the need for action, that these reports, these recommendations and the events of this year need to be a turning point and a driver of change. And the actions we've taken this year in relation to delivering new support services and counselling services, in relation to delivering new training mechanisms across the parliament and ensuring transparency about MPs and senators' take-up of those training mechanisms, and in relation to establishing the new Parliamentary Workplace Support Service to handle complaints and putting in place procedures to ensure that people are held to account for recommendations in response to those complaints, all the way through to members of Parliament, demonstrates a willingness to act. That willingness to act follows through now to the recommendations in the Jenkins report. We want to see response to these recommendations in the most positive and wholesome way and fulsome way possible. What I would say, through you, Mr President, to Senator Waters, is that we want to make sure that we continue to engage with you, the opposition and other parties across benches, staff, current and former, to make sure we get the responses to this right. And we've funded responses to date, we've acted to date, we will continue to do that. And I, of course, join you, as I have already publicly and in here, in acknowledging all of those who participated in this review and drove it to this point.
Minister, your time has expired. Senator Waters, a supplementary question.
Thanks, President. Commissioner Jenkins has said that one of the most common themes raised by those who made submissions was the critical role of leaders in creating and maintaining a safe, respectful and inclusive workplace. It comes from the top. When we see the Prime Minister refuse to allow an independent investigation in allegations against a senior minister, refuse to remove a member accused of harassing constituents from committee roles, take aside a female member who dared to cross the floor for a pastoral care chat, what message is that sending from the top?
Minister.
Mr President, I don't, on this day, in receipt of this report, with its recommendations that do require us to work collectively and together to effectively implement them, wish to politicise the report, actions in response to it, in the type of way that Senator Waters' question invites me to do so. As I said before, the events of this year are a catalyst for change. The events of this year have been a catalyst for the type of changes that we have already implemented together as a parliament, and for the work that Commissioner Jenkins has undertaken with the engagement of so many staff, current and former, so many members of parliament, current and former. And I thank indeed those who particularly had interviews with Commissioner Jenkins as part of this process, as I did, in terms of ensuring that all of her thinking and recommendations could be fully informed by how to get the best possible outcomes to set the best possible standard.
Your time has expired. Senator Waters, a second supplementary question.
Thanks, President. Another strong theme in the report is that there are rarely any consequences for the abuser if a complaint is made about bullying, sexual harassment or sexual assault. In fact, often they get promoted, while the complainant suffers the consequences, being gaslit, frozen out of work, moved on or encouraged to quit. Will the government commit to introducing a code of conduct for politicians and senior staff that would provide real consequences and act as a genuine deterrent to bad behaviour?
Minister.
Thanks, Mr President. I touched in my primary answer in relation to the question of consequences and the fact that the work we've already done this year ensures that we have put in place processes that mean if recommendations through an independent process are made in response to an allegation of workplace bullying, harassment or the like, that those recommendations need to be acted on, and that there are transparent and public consequences, including for members of parliament, if that's not the case. Commissioner Jenkins's recommendations build upon that, and we want to work to ensure that we do have those independent and effective processes in place. Commissioner Jenkins's recommendations do also recommend the development of a code of practice in relation to parliamentarians, a code of practice in relation to parliamentary staff, and standards of practice in relation to all work occupants within this workplace. These are some of the actions that we're committed to working through with other parties to ensure they're delivered upon in the most effective and successful way possible.
Senator Griff.
Yes, thank you, Mr President. My question is to Minister Payne, representing the Minister for Defence. Minister, the AUKUS security agreement and the government's decision to spend many billions on nuclear submarines is predicated on the rise of China. But there are signs that China will soon peak or may have already done so. Their economy is not what it was. GDP growth is rapidly decelerating, productivity growth has tumbled, and the country is dangerously exposed to a collapsing real estate bubble. The country is ageing rapidly and its birth rate has plummeted. China will almost certainly grow old before it grows rich and may pose very little risk to Australia. Given this context, what is the strategic rationale for a long-term investment in nuclear submarines?
The Minister representing the Minister for Defence, Senator Payne.
Thank you, Mr President. I thank Senator Griff for his questions. I note the Senator's points. However, all of the advice to government, all of the work that we have done with counterparts in the region and indeed more broadly tells us that our strategic environment has most certainly deteriorated faster than anticipated, faster than expected, and the trajectory of the strategic environment is not expected to change substantially. And so the decision to pursue the trilateral partnership with our oldest allies and partners, the United States and the United Kingdom, is about securing or protecting our security and our prosperity, as all countries do. It's about making a contribution to regional stability. And we'll continue to work not just with those traditional partners and allies, but across a whole range of relationships in the region and, again, more broadly. And I've spoken about these in this chamber before. I've spoken about our engagements with ASEAN, very much focused on the ASEAN outlook on the Indo-Pacific, at the centre of our perceptions of the Indo-Pacific. Spoken about our relationships across the Five Eyes in terms of intelligence sharing. Spoken about our more contemporary relationships in the Quad itself as a new and innovative, focused group of 4 leading democracies addressing some of the key issues which also challenge our strategic environment, like climate change, like the vaccine challenge that we've spoken about in this chamber this week, like cyber and critical technologies.
Your time has expired. Senator Griff, a supplementary question.
Minister, strategic analysts from ASPI suggest the likelihood of conflict with China is greatest in the next 5 years, long before any new subs arrive. Conflict is most likely to occur in Taiwan, conflict the Defence Minister has committed us to fighting. Minister, wouldn't it be more prudent for us to invest in equipment that would be available in the coming years when the risk is perceived to be greater?
Minister.
Thank you very much, Mr President, and I can absolutely assure Senator Griff and the chamber that these two things are not mutually exclusive, and that is not the approach that the government is taking, not an either-or approach. In fact, we are doing both. And any reference to the record, for example, of the OSMIN meetings of the last 2 years, both 2020 and 2021, provides a very clear indicator of the government's commitments and ambitions in that regard. And as you say, the Defence Minister has spoken of those in his recent comments. So we will work closely, as I said, with those counterparts in the region, with ASEAN, with our Quad partners, with our Five Eyes partners, with the European Union, particularly given their Indo-Pacific strategy recently released. I was speaking to the Canadian Foreign Minister the new Canadian Foreign Minister last week in relation to the work that Canada is also doing in this area. Australia is not the only country, by any stretch, by any consideration, who is facing these issues and addressing these issues head-on.
Your time has expired. Senator Griff, a second supplementary.
Some ministers have made the claim that we need to invest in defence because, and I'll quote, "without sovereignty you don't have a country," end of quote. Hasn't the government already compromised Australia's sovereignty by the Defence Minister stating that in any armed conflict between China and the United States, Australia is locked into sending Australia's finest young men and women into that theatre of war?
Minister.
Thank you, Mr President, and I thank Senator Griff for his second supplementary question. The focus on sovereignty is one which is a key priority for the government. And in all of the comments and speeches and remarks that have been made from the Prime Minister to myself to the Defence Minister over a period of time, an extended period of time, our absolute priority has been Australia's national interests and protecting Australia's sovereignty. The Australian people expect no less, and the Australian people deserve no less.
Senator Marielle Smith.
My question is to the Minister representing the Prime Minister, Senator Birmingham. As then Minister for Social Services, in 2015, Mr Morrison removed the exemption for parents who are conscientious objectors to children's vaccinations, implementing what he called no jab, no play and no pay. This month, Mr Morrison declared it was time for governments to step back and that he wasn't in favour of mandatory vaccines. Can the minister clarify what Mr Morrison's position on vaccination of children is?
The Minister order. The Minister representing the Prime Minister, Senator Birmingham.
Thanks, Mr President. Thanks, Senator Smith, for the question, and it's a very important question. The no jab, no pay policy worked very effectively and continues to work very effectively to help to encourage Australia to meet and to achieve some of the highest rates of childhood vaccination and immunisation in the world. The policy was implemented after it had been identified that there were areas of decline in relation to childhood vaccination occurring, and that those areas of decline were obvious in particular communities around the country, and that it was crucial to create stronger incentives for people to make the decision and the choice to have their children vaccinated. Pleasingly, Mr President, those policies have worked, and indeed I am sure the success of childhood vaccination in Australia is one of the reasons why the COVID-19 vaccination program has also been so successful across this country. That we are a nation overwhelmingly of vaccinators, if you like, Mr President, people who recognise the medical benefits of vaccination, and importantly a program like No Jab, No Pay was structured to particularly motivate those who may just not have gotten around to getting a vaccination, crucially to encourage people and to make sure they are very aware of the importance of that and to think it through seriously if they are not going to do so. We know that that program has worked, has lifted vaccination rates across Australian children once again, and in doing so has protected not just those who have been vaccinated, but of course importantly has helped to protect even those children who have not been vaccinated by continuing to maintain high levels of herd immunity for a number of childhood diseases.
Senator Smith.
Does Mr Morrison agree with Senator Rennick that, and I quote, children do not need to take the vaccine?
Minister.
Thanks, Mr President. Well, at present, COVID-19 vaccines are not approved for children under the age of 12 unless there are exceptional or extenuating medical circumstances. So at present, indeed, children are not approved to receive that vaccine. The government, through the Therapeutic Goods Administration, is reviewing the evidence in relation to childhood vaccination. The United States is one of the few countries in the world to have begun a population-wide rollout of vaccines to children. We now look forward to having the benefit of that data and evidence to inform the approvals process, the safety, the dosage rates and information for Australian children. Once the TGA has completed its work, ATAGI will do likewise, and assuming approvals are granted, the government stands ready to both deliver and see administration of vaccines to Australian children for COVID-19, and will encourage all parents to do that once those safeguards are in place.
Minister. Senator Smith, a second supplementary.
Senator Rennick has claimed that vaccinating children against COVID-19 is more likely to increase risk of ill health. Does Senator Rennick's claim reflect medical advice? And if not, will Mr Morrison publicly rebuke Senator Rennick's statements?
Minister.
Thanks, Mr President. Vaccination can elicit concern in many. Vaccinating children can elicit even more concern, particularly in parents. And so I would urge all to be responsible in their comments and not to create unnecessary fear or concern in relation to vaccine programs at all, but particularly in relation to childhood vaccination. The government, from the Prime Minister down, will make sure that when we have that advice from the TGA and ATAGI, that is the advice that we take to the nation. Australians should have confidence that we will act on the health expertise, medical science and best possible advice and information, and that when we recommend childhood vaccinations occur, it will be because they are safe, they are credible and they will help to fight against COVID and to protect Australia's children.
Minister, your time has expired. Senator Bragg.
Thank you very much, Mr President. My question is to the Minister representing the Minister for Home Affairs, Senator Cash. Can the Minister outline what steps the government is taking to keep Australians safe and to ensure that we are well placed to deal with the new COVID-19 variant of concern?
The Minister representing the Minister for Home Affairs, Senator Cash.
Thank you, Mr President, and I thank Senator Bragg for the question. And, Mr President, as we have done throughout the entire pandemic, the Morrison government has acted quickly but cautiously to protect the livelihoods and lives of Australians. On the 28th of November, the Minister for Health signed a biosecurity determination preventing people who have been in an Omicron high-risk country in the previous 14 days from entering Australia unless they are an Australian citizen, permanent resident, immediate family member of a citizen or are otherwise exempt. Omicron high-risk countries for this determination are the 8 southern African countries of Botswana, Eswatini, Lesotho, Malawi, Mozambique, Namibia, South Africa and Zimbabwe. Direct flights from these countries will not be permitted until the 12th of December. In addition, and based on the advice of the Chief Medical Officer of Australia, the National Security Committee of Cabinet has taken the necessary and temporary decision to pause the next step to safely reopen Australia to vaccinated visa holders, including skilled and student cohorts, until the 15th of December. This includes the reopening to Japan and Korea. Mr President, this temporary pause will ensure Australia can gather the information we need to better understand the Omicron variant, including the efficacy of the vaccine, the range of illness, including if it may generate more mild symptoms, and the level of transmission. As is the case currently, all persons entering Australia must make an Australian travel declaration before they arrive. Again, on behalf of the government, I can assure all Australians we're taking the cautious approach we have had throughout the pandemic to protect the lives and livelihoods of Australians.
Senator Bragg, a supplementary question.
Mr President, how has Australia's experience in dealing with COVID-19 to date given us the opportunity to take this cautious action?
Minister.
Thank you, Mr President. The strong measures that we took at the start of the pandemic have ensured that we fared better than most countries in dealing with COVID-19. Our closure of the border to China was a significant step that allowed us to continue protecting Australian lives and livelihoods. Over 12% of people in the USA and 11% of people in the UK have had COVID-19. When you contrast that to Australia, 0.4% of Australians have had COVID-19. Of the 38 developed OECD countries, Australia has had the second lowest number of COVID-19 cases on a per capita basis. And again on a per capita basis, the UK and USA have had over 40 times the number of COVID deaths compared to Australia. By avoiding the death rates of OECD countries, we have saved, as Australians, around 30,000 lives.
Senator Bragg, a second supplementary.
Thanks, Mr President. What can each and every Australian do to allow Australia to continue to safely reopen to the world?
Minister.
Well, Mr President, as the Leader of the Government in the Senate has said, the best way for each and every Australian to protect themselves, and not just themselves but their family and their community, is, of course, to get vaccinated. Without a doubt, again, as the Leader of the Government has pointed out today, we have done an amazing job as Australians, with now some of the highest vaccination rates in the world. And of that, we can all be incredibly proud. Australia now has the equal 10th highest with Norway first dose vaccination rate in the OECD. Australia's full vaccination rate is ranked 14th highest. Mr President, we know that vaccination against COVID-19 reduces the risk of the virus And while at this point in time we don't know about the new variant, of course vaccination will continue to protect us. We can of course again be confident we will emerge on the other side.
Senator Lambie.
Thank you, Mr President. My question is for the Minister representing the Minister for Housing, Minister Ruston. Minister, Tasmania's housing crisis is at boiling point. The average Hobart renter is paying nearly a third of their income to keep a roof over their head, and that's on a good day. We've got people sleeping in their cars, families are camping out in friends' living rooms, and meanwhile your government is running yet another talkfest inquiry on housing affordability. We don't need another inquiry. Your answers are already there. We already know what we need to do. We need more affordable housing. Why can't your government see this, and what action will you actually take instead of having just another talk fest?
The Minister representing the Minister for Housing, in this case Senator Birmingham.
Thanks, Mr President. I thank Senator Lambie for her question, although I reject some of the characterisation in that question. Indeed, our government has pursued multiple policies and is making multiple investments to support access to housing across Australia. We're providing an expected $9 billion through 2021-22 to support housing and homelessness across the country, which includes around $1.6 billion, Mr President, being provided to the states to meet their responsibility in support for housing and homelessness. As a government, Mr President, we have put a particular priority in relation to supporting home ownership and to supporting more first homeowners into home ownership. And we are very pleased that programs our government has delivered over the last few years under Prime Minister Morrison, from Home Builder through to the Home Guarantee schemes, including the First Home Guarantee, the New Home Guarantee and the Family Home Guarantee, have helped more than 300,000 Australians to become homeowners. In the middle of a pandemic, we have seen first homeowner numbers at their highest level in nearly 15 years, Mr President. That is something that, as parties of government that have long championed from our very foundation the importance of home ownership, we take great pride in seeing that achievement. We've made sure, Mr President, that we put in place the policies to help those Australians who might have struggled to get a deposit to be able to get a deposit and get into the housing market more easily. That is what our home guarantee schemes are doing, and in this year's budget we made the extension of that home guarantee scheme into particularly supporting single parents to be able to access a home deposit and the opportunity of home ownership. And we know that that is one of the best ways to provide a lifetime of economic security, particularly through retirement years, alongside of successful retirement savings policies.
Senator Lambie, a supplementary question.
Thank you, Mr President. Minister, the head of your Talkfest inquiry, the member for Mackellar, said last week that a housing affordability crisis is a moral failure by the state and local governments. Isn't the fact that we have people sleeping in their cars a moral failure on the federal government as well, or is it that it's everyone else's fault like usual?
Minister.
Thanks, Mr President. Well, in addition to the policies that I spoke about before, and particularly the billions of dollars in funding, including to the states and territories, the work of our National Housing Financing and Investment Corporation and its infrastructure facility in particular has supported the delivery of over 6,600 new social, affordable and market dwellings. So, Mr President, we've pursued policies and continue to deliver policies across the country that have helped with the delivery of additional social housing and affordable dwellings around the country, that help states and territories in the provision of support for homelessness and delivery of those policies, and, Mr President, that have helped more than 300,000 Australians. I hear Senator McKim inviting me to tell him about our tax policies. Well, $1.5 billion extra into the pockets of hard-working Australians every month. That's also helping Australians to pay for their mortgages, for their rents, for their homes, Senator McKim.
Senator Lambie, a second supplementary question.
Thank you, Mr President. There are more than 4,000 people on the social housing wait list in Tasmania right now. It takes nearly 18 months on a good day for the neediest applicants to get put into a home. My staff are taking calls from people who are at their wits' end, and we're having to tell them there's nothing we can do. The housing just isn't there. Your government holds the purse strings, Minister. We've seen this through COVID. This is happening on your watch. You have the power to turn this around. Why aren't you paying for the social housing we know that we need?
Order. Order. Senator Abetz, Senator Lambie. Are you rising on a point of order, Senator Hanson-Young?
Yes, I am, Mr President. I don't think it's appropriate, given what has been handed down today, to have growling and dog noises coming from this side of the chamber while a female member in this place is on her feet. It happened. I don't know who is responsible for it, but it is inappropriate. And if we are going to change culture from the top, that means all of us.
Senator Hanson-Young, Senator Wong?
Well, I did, because I in fact said who's growling, and I would ask one of the senators at that end perhaps to do the right thing and withdraw. At least fess up. Gee, you're tough, aren't you? You're happy to dish it out and not happy to take responsibility. I mean, really. Growling, Mr President.
Senator Wong, I certainly did not hear anything. Senator Wong, I'm not challenging what you heard. I certainly did not hear. I cannot ask someone to withdraw something I did not hear. Order. Order. Interjections as order. Senator Molan. Senator Wong. Senator Molan. Senator Wong. Interjections, as everyone in this chamber has heard on many occasions, are disorderly. I did call a senator who interjected across the chamber on my right to order. I did not hear the particular incident that you have raised. If it occurred, I would ask the senator involved to reflect upon it and to withdraw if they did do what has been stated. However, I did not hear the particular interjection myself. I think I'm calling the minister.
Thanks, Mr President. Well, Mr President, I do reject a number of the assertions in Senator Lambie's supplementary question. Our government is taking the most comprehensive suite of policies to support housing and homelessness. The work of NIFIC, which I referenced before, delivering thousands of additional houses, low-income and affordable houses and dwellings through its operation. The work under our National Partnership Agreement with the states and territories, providing $1.6 billion a year to them. The work in relation to home ownership that I referenced before, driving those home ownership rates higher, which we are so pleased to see and which we will continue to pursue and support as a government, those 300,000 plus additional homeowners that we've managed to achieve as a result of these policy settings, and indeed specifically in relation to Tasmania, the work to provide a waiver of more than $150 million to the Tasmanian government in relation to their housing-related debts to help them pursue policies too.
Minister, time has expired. Senator Gallagher.
Thank you, Mr President. My question is to the Minister representing the Minister for Health, Senator Colbeck. In early November, President Biden announced the US had already enough vaccine supply for every child in America and had already commenced the process of packing and shipping out vaccine doses. Are there paediatric COVID-19 vaccine doses already in Australia? And if not, on what date will the vials of COVID-19 vaccines for children aged 5 to 11 arrive on Australian shore?
The Minister representing the Minister for Health, Senator Colbeck.
Thank you, Mr President. Thank Senator for the question. As Senator Birmingham indicated earlier, there is at this point in time no approved vaccine available for children 5 to 12. That process is still being undertaken by research that's being done by ATAGI, and of course will also be followed up by the appropriate work by the TGA, Mr President. So we don't, at this point in time, have an approved vaccine available for children aged 5 to 12, Mr President. While that process is continuing, Mr President, preparations are being made to ensure that if the appropriate approvals are put in place, Mr President, we have supplies available to us to commence a vaccination program. But at this point in time, Mr President, we don't have the full range of data to be able to approve a vaccine program for children aged 5 to 7.
Minister, resume your seat. Senator Gallagher, on a point of order.
On relevance, and I was listening carefully to the minister, but the question was whether we have any vaccine, paediatric doses of the vaccine available in Australia now, or when they're coming, not whether they've been approved or not. We know they haven't been approved. The question was very specific to the actual issue of supply of vaccine.
I will allow you to draw the minister back to the question. I've been listening carefully. Minister, I will give you the call, but Senator Gallagher has brought you back to the question.
Thank you, Mr President, and I'd invite the opposition to listen to my answer, because I did say during my answer that has just had a point of order taken on it, possibly just for the point of interruption and taking a point of order, but that we would ensure, while that process was occurring, that we would have supplies available for us in time to commence a vaccination program for children aged 5 to 12, if and when the vaccination program was approved by the. You clearly didn't read the Respect at Work report today, did you, Senator?
Order.
So, Mr President, we are making sure that while the investigative work that's being done by ATAGI and by the TGA are undertaken, we're ready to start a program.
Your time has expired. Senator Gallagher, a supplementary question.
Thank you, Mr President. I take it that there are no paediatric doses in the country at the moment. So will the Morrison government guarantee that there will be sufficient supply for an immediate rollout as soon as ATAGI approval for vaccination of children aged 5 to 11 is obtained?
Minister. Order. 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 Order on my right. Order on my left. Order. I will call the minister once there's silence in the chamber. Senator Gallagher. Minister.
Thank you, Mr President. Senator Gallagher has just demonstrated what happens when you have a pre-prepared answer or question and don't listen to the answer to the first question, Mr President. I indicated a number of times during my answer to the first question, while the processes that are being undertaken for the approval or otherwise of a vaccination program for children aged 5 to 12, arrangements are being put in place to ensure that when and if that process occurs, we have vaccines available for children as a part of a vaccination program. I've said it 3 or 4 times now, and it's disappointing that the Labor Party don't even bother to listen to the answers that have been given to the questions.
Senator Gallagher, a second supplementary question.
I do have a second supplementary. Thank you, Mr President. Given there is competition around the world for these paediatric vaccine doses, and with Omicron variant emerging, will the minister assure Australian parents there will be no shortage of vaccines for their children? And does Mr Morrison accept that this is a race?
Minister. Minister, you have the call. Senator Hughes, order.
Thank you, Mr President. Can I say it is really
order on my left.
It is really quite disappointing that the Labor Party try to confuse the Omicron circumstance right now with the proposals that are being developed for the vaccination program for 5 to 12-year-olds, Mr President. So, Mr President, the Labor Party are trying to drive fear into the Australian community with questions. They're not interested in the answer, Mr President, quite clearly by their interjections across the chamber. They're not interested in what the government's got to say in respect of this matter, Mr President. And I've indicated already a number of times in each of my answers that as a part of our process in preparation for this, in the circumstance when the ATAGI and the TGA approve a vaccine, there will be vaccines available for a program for Australian children.
Senator Davey.
Thank you very much, Mr President. My question is to the Minister for Emergency Management and National Recovery and Resilience, Senator Mackenzie. Senator Mackenzie, we've recently seen some quite devastating flooding in the north of New South Wales and southwest of Queensland. We've seen some crops destroyed just when farmers thought that they were going to be able to start repaying the bank. Can the minister please update the Senate on what the Liberals and Nationals in government are doing to keep Australians safe, to provide support to the communities that are affected by recent floods and severe weather, and some information for the communities that are right at this very minute watching their TV screens and listening to the weather reports in trepidation?
Minister for Emergency Management, Senator Mackenzie.
Thank you very much, Mr President. I thank Senator Davey for her question and for her ongoing advocacy for regional New South Wales. I'm sure everyone in this place will agree that flooding and severe weather we're seeing in New South Wales at the moment is very, very concerning. That's why our government is already providing assistance to New South Wales through the disaster recovery funding arrangements. It's the primary way we can provide support to states and territories that are affected by disasters. And this year we've put in a new streamlined process for activating DRFA assistance so that we as a Commonwealth can respond more quickly following severe disasters. We've been working very closely with New South Wales on ensuring that we deliver the support needed where it's needed. And for that reason, we've extended that funding from the original 7 local government areas identified by New South Wales earlier this month to another 13 local government areas last Friday. And we stand ready to extend that support again should New South Wales need further assistance. The support currently being provided covers the critical early needs of a community following a disaster, support for people suffering through hardship and distress, financial assistance for small businesses and primary producers, and funding to clean up and repair damaged essential public assets. The DRFA continues to be the most effective and immediate way that our government can support Australians affected by disasters, helping them to get back on their feet and to keep them safe. In the last decade, we've provided over $12 billion in funding to states and territories through this mechanism, and in the last few weeks alone, in addition to the support we've provided to New South Wales, we've also worked closely with other states and territories to get assistance to Australians on the ground. Queensland, who also experienced flooding earlier this month across 5 local government areas. South Australia, 24 LGAs, and I'd like to shout out to Rowan Ramsey from the other place for his strong advocacy for the farmers there. And in Victoria, prolonged power outage payments.
Minister, your time has expired. Senator Davey, a supplementary question.
Yes, thank you. Minister, we've got forecasts that will see a wetter-than-average summer. We're now predicted to be in a La Nina weather cycle, which normally brings increased rain and higher chances of flooding. This will lead to more flooding across the east of the country. What is our government doing to mitigate against flood damage and to help with the repair bill, but also to prepare for future flooding events?
Minister.
Thank you. With a La Nina established in our region, we're certainly going to see higher-than-average rainfalls across many parts of the country, and unfortunately that means more flooding in the east and cyclones to our north. We know floods are the most costly natural disaster, and that's why flood mitigation is such a high-impact investment. We also know from the findings of the Royal Commission that flood mitigation is incredibly important. Building resilience saves recovery costs later on. Today, I was very proud to announce that applications are open for the second round of national flood mitigation, we're absolutely putting another $50 million of investment on the table for flood mitigation, bringing a total investment by our government to $100 million for the last 2 years, and building on the strong demand that we saw across the country. The National Flood Mitigation Program will be funded from our Emergency Response Fund, which is a future-focused, dedicated, sustainable investment fund.
Senator Davey, a second supplementary question.
Thank you. Can the minister please explain how the Emergency Response Fund operates, how people can access it and how it can be used to better prepare Australia for natural disasters?
Minister.
Thank you, Senator. As I said, it is a national program and it will be delivered in partnership with states and territories, and I encourage all local governments to work closely with their jurisdiction to apply over coming months. The Emergency Response Fund is a dedicated investment fund credited with approximately $4 billion and established in 2019. The Act is very, very prescriptive in how the $200 million is available to be accessed each financial year, and how we as a government can actually use that. $50 million each year can be used to build resilience and prepare for or reduce the risk of future natural disasters, which is the announcement I made today on flood mitigation funding. $150 million each financial year can be available to fund emergency response and recovery following natural disasters in Australia that have a significant or catastrophic impact when the government determines that existing recovery programs are insufficient to meet the scale of the response.
Senator Birmingham.
Thanks, Mr President. I ask that further questions be placed on notice.